During the early to mid-70s, Led Zeppelin really carried music through one of its darkest periods. And they pushed through creating art at the highest level. This is my series where I'm talking about every Led Zeppelin album in chronological order. And today we're talking about the band's return to folk music, signaling a shift in styles that was happening all across the mainstream landscape. Led Zeppelin 3. 1969 had been kind of a wild year for the band. They'd already had 2 massively successful albums and 1 huge hit with Whole Lotta Love. And they'd been on tour almost non-stop for a year. The anticipation for their follow-up 3rd record was massive, and they'd made an effort to begin recording it right away, but it kind of ended up falling off. Some time went by, and Robert Plant thought of a cottage in Wales where he had spent some time as a kid, and invited Jimmy out there for a little break. The place was really sweet, but very primitive, so whatever music they were going to play, it was going to be acoustic. They ended up having a great time and invited John Bonham and John Paul Jones out there to join them to figure out what they were going to do about this new record. This new atmosphere was conducive to the vibe that the band were going for. As amazing as it was to see Whole Lotta Love get the success that it did, they also didn't like the idea of being stuck in a box of heavy blues rock music, and they really felt with this album they'd have to do something totally different. 1970 was kind of the last gasp of the psychedelic rock counterculture era. A lot of artists had already been moving in a folk rock direction nearing the end of the last decade, with bands like the Grateful Dead, CSNY, and even the Rolling Stones making moves towards folk music. Tangerine was a song that Jimmy Page wrote back when he was still a member of the Yardbirds, but it never came to be anything at the time, and the vocal harmonies that he and Robert Plant would develop would really bring it to life and kind of define this new sound that Led Zeppelin were going for. Oh, baby, since I've been loving you. Since I've Been Loving You is a little nod to their heavy blues era, but it was obvious that they were moving actively away from this genre. And the Immigrant Song opened the record with an explosion of sounds. And Robert's absolutely wild vocals. I mentioned in the last video that Robert had begun to introduce themes in his lyrics of the stuff that he was interested in, mythology, history, and the Immigrant Song has a lot of references to the Norse legends that he'd been interested in while staying in Wales. Later in the summer, they went back to England to complete recording for the album, which was released in October 1970. It was a massive success, and it really was a light in a very dark time in music history. This was less than a month since the death of Jimi Hendrix, and Janis Joplin had been found dead the day before the release. The world needed this album badly.